people to the meeting? It seems to me that we should, and then we can ask if anyone who we don't know, ask who they are early on. Seem okay?
I did just get a message, by the way. I just want to mention Shani, sorry if I'm butchering that name. She is with Grossman as well.
Okay, so everyone in the waiting room is known to us. Is that correct?
More or less. Eve, I know, is a parent of one of the campers there, so
Yeah.
she's here for Grossman. I know that, but she's not here on behalf of Grossman. You know what I mean?
Yep. All right, so why don't we open the meeting? It's 10:05. Calling the meeting to order. Kay Peterson, chair.
Stephen Krescall, member.
And here's John. John, can you unmute yourself? Can we unmute him, or does he have to?
I think he's just finding a quiet space.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Sorry,
Hey,
I was at work and I was caught up in another here, and now I'm completely committed to my Board of Health role. So sorry about that.
We appreciate it, John. So we were just doing roll call. So it's your turn to say that you're present. John, can you hear me?
Okay, sorry to be late.
Can you just indicate that you're present, please?
Oh, John Quackenbush, I am present. Thank you.
All right, here we go. So shall we admit all the people in the waiting room?
I'm happy to promote everybody to a panelist if that's what you guys want.
And that includes 7 entities. Is that correct?
Yes, 7.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Please go ahead.
So everybody should be getting an invitation if they want to rejoin as a panelist, which allows you to unmute yourself and share your video. So it looks like 2 people declined their invitation to be a panelist, so it might just be here to observe the meeting.
Yeah, those are the shared service folks. I think they're just here to listen in, so we can kind of just leave them be.
Okay.
Would they like to be able to make comments? If so, they could raise their hands as observers, right? That's not the right term. Participants, could they raise their hands, and would you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, all right, so there we go. All right, so welcome everyone. This is a Board of Health meeting that involves first a hearing about the Grossman camp, and we have several people here who are related to that. And then we have a second agenda item about the MBTA Communities Act that we'll get to at the end. We begin our meetings with a citizen comment period, but I would like to ask people who have comments about the camp issue to wait until we've started that discussion, and I'll indicate when in that discussion would be a good time for comments and questions. Are there any comments unrelated to either of the agenda items? Please raise your hand if that's the case. I don't see any hands raised. Do you agree?
No hands raised.
Okay, so let's begin with our our first agenda item, Camp Grossman. I would like just, first of all, to ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm Kay Peterson. I'm the chair of the Board of Health. John and Steve, could you introduce yourselves, please?
Sure, I'm John Quackenbush. I'm a member of the Board of Health and was recently elected to a second term.
Stephen Kruskall, member of the Board of Health. Now in my 9th or 10th year, I'm losing track.
Part of our institutional memory.
Yeah.
Gail?
Gail Barsa, public health nurse for the town of Dover and Sherburne.
Jason?
Jason Belmonte, Director for the Dover Health Department.
Suzanne?
Suzanne Hiltz, Board of Health Administrative Assistant.
And do you want to introduce the person who's sitting to your right?
Sophia Kriegsman, our Board of Health intern.
And then I hope I'm going to see everybody on this. I see Liam McSweeney.
Hi, I'm Liam McSweeney, Camp Grossman Program Director.
Catherine Ruggieri.
Hi, I'm Catherine Ruggieri. I'm the interim CFAO for the JCC Greater Boston, which is part of Camp Grossman.
CFAO meaning?
The Chief Financial and Administrative Officer.
Is it Shawnee Winton or?
I'm Shawnee Winton. I'm the Vice President of Programs of the JCC, and I directly oversee Camp Grossman.
Okay. Looks like Hochstein.
Hi, sorry, it's Leslie Hochstein, and I am the director at Camp Grossman.
Okay. Genevieve Aguilar.
Hi, my name is Genevieve Aguilar. I am the parent of multiple campers who attended Camp Grossman, including my son, Luke, who overdosed from medication administered to him at Camp Grossman while in the care and custody of Camp Grossman. I'm also apologize. I found out about this less than 24 hours ago, and so I'm on vacation with my kids, so I'm going to stay off camera as much as possible, but this was, as you can imagine, very important to my family, so thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Have I called on everyone? I don't want to have missed someone. Suzanne, have I gotten everyone? All the participants?
Yep, everybody's been called on.
Okay, great. So I think we're all aware of the incidents that have led to our meeting today. I'd like to begin by having Jason do a quick summary of them just to be sure we're all on the same page. Obviously, he's not going to go into every detail, but I think this should just be a summary. And then after that, I'd like to have people involved with Grossman talk about their assessment of the underlying issues and the root causes of the problems, and talk about the camp's plans to address the problems going forward. And then I'd like to invite board members to ask questions of people from Grossman, and then we'll invite any parents or members of the public who want to ask questions. And then we'll have some discussion. And in that first section, anyone who's involved with Grossman, I think anyone who is involved in the leadership at Grossman is welcome to talk about their thoughts about the causes and potential solutions to the problems that have been identified.
So
Okay.
Chair Peterson, I'm sorry.
Who's-
It's me, sorry, Genevieve Aguilar. Since I'm on vacation and have some acute childcare challenges, I wonder if it would be possible for me to just briefly address the board following Director Belmonte's comments, because I'm not sure that I can stay for the full time of the meeting, and I would like to have the opportunity to address you all.
That would be fine.
Okay, thank you very much.
So Jason, you're going to go ahead and summarize, and then
Yeah, sure. I'll try and be as brief as I can here. Um, so what kind of prompted all this is it was kind of a a cumulative type thing. So for purposes of this, we're going to go back to last spring or winter, I guess. It was February. So last February 2024, we received a complaint from a former employee, just kind of like a laundry list of issues that were present at camp. So at the time, any complaint we get, we log, we follow up on, do our due diligence. I met with Camp Grossman at the time, kind of went through each item one by one, made sure they understood each requirement. Some of it was legitimate, some of it was not, but nonetheless, we kind of combed through everything we could. When the time came for their camp inspection for 2024, I made sure to bring a copy of that list with me just so we could kind of, double check, make sure they were doing everything they needed to do. I had felt at the time that we were in a good spot with that. To the camp's credit, they took everything seriously, did what they needed to do in terms of actionable items. Fast forward to this past July, we received a complaint from a camper's parent about a child that had ingested an unknown amount of laxatives. Something they had that the camper had in their possession on a school bus. So certainly that was a major concern on our end that prompted immediate action. So myself and our public health nurse, Gail, met with the camp, spoke with mom, spoke with DCF as well, just to kind of see what we could do to get to the bottom of all that. This resulted, myself and Gail had a meeting with Liam and Leslie, and Catherine, actually, for that matter. I believe that was July 30th, just to kind of talk through things, establish corrective actions. And where we kind of left off in that meeting was, I said to them, this can't ever happen again. If it does, it will very likely result in some type of hearing. And very next day, there was some type of miscommunication that resulted in a camper missing the bus. It was actually the same family that involved in this laxative incident. So I had felt at that point, just looking at this full scope of things, it was time for us to all kind of get together, talk things through, debrief and kind of go into next summer fresh, with more up to date, more improved plans, processes. So that's kind of where we stand as of today. I know the camp also, just in general this summer, has kind of had an uptick in incidents as well. Just, and I know things happen, but there's been a couple of things this summer that have come up, that have come our way. My ultimate goal is I just want to make sure Camp Grossman is in sync with us, and they're back on track and doing everything they're supposed to be doing, so we can make sure we're protecting these kids as much as we can.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions for Jason about just the facts of what happened? Are we okay to proceed? Raise your hand if you have a question for Jason. Okay, so Genevieve, it's you that you have to, I know you have other activities today.
Thank you.
I want to clarify something. Your name, I don't recognize your name. You're not the parent, or are you the parent of the laxative problem?
I am. Genevieve is a nickname. Eve is a nickname for Genevieve.
Okay.
That's what's throwing you off.
That is throwing me off. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, so why don't you go ahead and talk at this point? And of course, you're welcome to come back if your circumstances.
I might listen, but I'm trying not to be within earshot of my children, and
Yeah.
you can appreciate that it's challenging. So thank you for the opportunity to address you all. I had my older son attend Camp Grossman last year. It was a wonderful experience. Decided to send both my kids to Camp Grossman this summer. And really there are some communication issues ongoing for both of my kids that were serious and not to be overstated, but it was the failure to communicate that really led to dangerous nursing practices throughout the summer and throughout repeated conversations with camp leadership, and really no ability to meaningfully address them, to the point where we ultimately felt like, for my younger son's safety, we had to pull him from camp midsummer, which you can imagine how difficult that is for a working parent, to have to find alternative camp arrangements midsummer that have availability. And we managed to do that. So that's just to help convey the seriousness of the issue and our lack of satisfaction with the actions that Camp Grossman were taking. From the beginning, we disclosed that my younger son has a chronic medical condition and would require some level of accommodation at Camp Grossman. This was disclosed in our camp application that we filled out in December. It was again disclosed to the camp in his health history in April, and in his camper profile that we filled out on May 1st. It became apparent very quickly before camp started that no one had read it or was prepared to offer those accommodations for my son. As recently as, the night before camp started on June 22nd, no one was aware of these accommodations we had been requesting. We had tried to sign up we did in fact sign up for multiple phone calls with nurses prior to camp starting, as the camp offered. I thought it was great that they did that. There was no sign up deadline or anything like that. No one called me at either of the first phone call. I signed up for a second phone call. No one called me at the time of the second phone call. I contacted the administrator of the list, which I believe was Liam, to, when you do the sign up Genius, and said, no one called me. My son is starting a new medication. There's been a change in his medical condition. I think it would be helpful to talk through. How do I get in touch with you? No one responded to that ever. I went in person to the camp before camp started, and was very proactive throughout to try to help my son have the best summer possible. He started a new medication less than a week before camp started, and the timing of the medication was variable as we were trying to pinpoint the exact the ideal opportunity. He has a chronic GI condition. We're trying to balance having him have appropriate bowel movements without also having like explosive diarrhea at summer camp with limited bathrooms, where they're swimming. So you can appreciate the balancing of that, and how it really required close coordination and communication with the camp. Unfortunately, the nurses, partway through camp, a few weeks into camp, decided they no longer wanted to communicate with us about whether they were in fact administering the medication or at what time they were administering the medication. I followed up multiple times to confirm if they gave him the medication at all, because we were seeing very surprising and unpredictable bowel movements at home, to the point where it was causing my son great anxiety, because he was having accidents in the middle of the night and wasn't sleeping through the night, like at 1, 2, 3 in the morning. They declined to provide the information, even despite repeated follow-up requests of what time they were administering the medication. They simply told me they had way too many campers to be able to provide that information, and I simply did not need it. After I escalated to camp leadership, they eventually agreed that they could do it on a going forward basis. I explained the importance of needing to know when they in fact were giving the medication for the past week, so I could pinpoint the data with his doctors and find the appropriate time to be administering his medication if we needed to make adjustments. They agreed that they would do it. Unfortunately, none of that happened going forward. Over the weekend, my husband and I tried to come up with a plan so that we could know what time my son was taking his medication and that he was in fact reliably taking it, because we had a lot of question marks about whether it was happening and at the correct time. And we did confirm ultimately with the camp that they were giving him medication several hours later than we had anticipated, which was why he was not able to sleep through the night and beginning to have significant anxiety about going to bed, because he was worried he was going to have accidents in the bed. And so we asked them to take a temporary pause from administering medication to him while at camp, so we could try if we could do it before camp. And if that would, again, we weren't sure if that would be manageable given the nature of his GI condition. And so we said, we'll need to coordinate closely, but please don't administer medication until further notice. We received written acknowledgement from the camp that they understood the plan. They wouldn't administer medication until further notice. For some reason, the nurse who had explained that it was unsafe for my son to even self-administer a single dose of medication, at the beginning of the camp session, sent a loose Ziploc baggie of unmarked medication home in my son's backpack, unsupervised. And it looks like chocolate. And there was an unopened box, and then there was an open box. Like I said, the box was gone. It was not in the wrapper. It was just like in a Ziploc bag, and it appeared to look like chocolate. When my son came home, he was acting strangely. We were able to determine that he had, in fact, ingested a large amount of medication in addition to what we had given him earlier that morning. When I called the camp office to ask how much was in the baggie so we could determine if he needed to go to the emergency room to have his stomach pumped or not, they were not able to tell us, and they did not have good records on how much they had actually administered because his dose had changed a little bit. And that made it much more stressful than it needed to be, even had they not made the decision to send him home without authorization, without any notice to us. Even when I was going to be at the camp less than 48 hours later in person to pick up the medication, should that have been desirable, which it was not at that time, they made this grave mistake. And then when I started to ask questions, including with Catherine and others about, how long he had access to the medication, when he got, just so we could make medical decisions, they declined to provide the information, and it felt very evasive. I also was concerned about other campers because, as Catherine explained, this was the standard camp practice to just dispense medications to children when they no longer were needed at camp, and to put it in the backpack. And I felt like, given that they had known that a child had overdosed on such medication, and we didn't even know to be checking for to expect that his medication had come home. And he initially tried to hide it in his room. So had he been more successful in that, he could have overdosed at a later time, and we would not have known, and it would have been very, very difficult to piece together. I was concerned that there was no communication to the rest of the campers and their families to say, this was a prior practice, we are making changes, but if you've sent home medication, or, if you sent in medication to camp, you need to make sure that it's accounted for, because, we were sending it back and not documenting it, and we were not communicating with you about that. So that felt like a very, a necessary corrective action that I was disappointed the camp declined to take. And then additionally, when my son went back to camp following his overdose and still had the lingering effects of the overdose, he was still having to interact with the same nurses who caused his overdose. And I had asked if, they could not be in contact anymore, and the camp said that they couldn't make that accommodation. And I think there's an obvious conflict of interest when a nurse who, has taken an action such that Camp Grossman thought it was necessary to report to DCF, to have that same person then be responsible and in the same room as my child for, providing medical care. It's even if she's not directly providing medical care, if she's overseeing someone or, be able to influence medical care administered to him, that leaves a lot of questions about whether he can do that. And then there was no one who could administer his medication. And ultimately we decided that we needed to have my son go to a camp where he could have access to a nurse who hadn't attempted to poison him and who was able to administer medication should he need that. And so it was a really unfortunate situation and not an action that we took lightly, because we did really have a wonderful experience for my other son for Camp Grossman. I think it's a special place. I don't want to see it shut down, but I was very disappointed with the way that the camp responded to, reporting an employee for potential child neglect, but then allowing that same person to continue working with children, administering medication, and finish out the rest of her summer and potentially come back in future summers, and not notify families that they had this very dangerous past practice and that other children were at risk, but took no action to try to protect those other campers. So I know there's a lot more to say, and I know the camp has taken some corrective action, but I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to hear my thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today and sharing your thoughts directly. It's very helpful to hear you speak in person about it. And I know it's hard to do that in a public forum like this, but I think it's good for everyone to hear your words directly. Thank you. Does anyone, I know you're going to be listening, but not necessarily participating. So if anyone has questions, do you want me to call you Genevieve or Liz? Or Eve right now?
Either your preference.
But not Liz. I don't know where that came from. But anyone have questions for Eve right now? Or additional comments? Well, I hope your son is doing well now. And
thank you. We actually had to take him to a GI psychologist, but he is doing better. Thank you.
Feel free to join us again if your circumstances allow. Otherwise, you can listen. And also this meeting is being recorded if you want to listen later. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I would like to move on to invite people from Grossman to speak about this, talk about your perspective on it. And I don't know which of you wants to speak, or if you all want to speak, but please raise your hand if you want to be. Leslie?
Yes, hi. I'll speak to what I can speak to, and
Leslie, can you just tell us your title again?
I'm sorry, I'm the director of Camp Grossman. Some of what I know, I don't know firsthand, and so if in some cases I may ask Liam to help answer any questions. There was a lot said, a lot came out of from Jason, and then a lot from Eve. I think that it might be easier. I mean, I certainly can do narratives as best I can, but rather than it sound like a lot of what Eve said, I concur with. A lot of what and did happen. A lot of what Jason said, obviously, I understand and agree with. So I think it might be easier if you ask me questions, but if you prefer to give some direction, because there was so much that was just discussed. So I'd rather speak to what you specifically would like to hear, if that's okay. Otherwise, I can go through.
All right, I would like you as the representative of the camp and others to chime in if possible, if they want. Speak about what you view as the root causes of these issues, and after you're done with that, to speak about corrective action, what you think would help kind of from happening in the future.
Thank you. Okay, so yes, there were various things talked about. So there's various issues. I think actually Eve didn't bring up the issue with regard to her son being kept at camp for family night, but I know Jason did. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly. And that was, Jason, the child did not miss the bus. We actually had a communication error where we believed he was staying for family night. After camp, we have family nights, and at family nights, families come and join their children. So we obviously have a huge administrative task of managing which children are staying because their parents are coming to camp, which children are going home on the bus. And then to compound matters, we also allow siblings of children who have the family night, even if it's not their family night, for their bunk, to stay as well. And some stay and some go home. So in the case of Eve's child who was kept at camp, she had intended for him to go home. It was an administrative error compounded by our a change from Google Forms to Microsoft Forms. We went back to, since then, we have gone back to Google Forms, and we have also implemented procedures to document when we have any question and any discrepancy, that it's very clear where we got the information for whether the child should stay or not. We get most of our information from online forms that are essentially permission slips. And so that's easily documented and traced. The issue is that sometimes, inevitably, on the day of the family night, we have numerous people who have not filled out a permission slip, who we have to then contact via email or phone. And in this particular case, due to a problem with Microsoft Forms that allowed a section of the form to not be documented properly, we then went to ask the unit head whether the child was supposed to stay or not, and then relied on their recollection instead of asking them to document and to show the email or the phone call and the time of the phone call. That has since been rectified. And I don't expect any problems with that going forward. The incident with regard to the medication that was sent home with Eve's child, that was, I would call a rogue, a combination of factors, a rogue nurse making a decision that unilaterally, and that is that putting the medication in the backpack of the child. I think that it sounds like Eve understands that that was our practice. That was not our practice, and that somehow I don't know if she thought she misunderstood Catherine or if Catherine misunderstood us, but sending medication home with the child in a backpack was absolutely not our policy or our practice. Sending medication home with bus counselors was our practice, and in some instances is still our practices after speaking with Jason and Gail. It's not our preferred practice by any means, but if in a pinch there are some cases where we may have to send medication home with a bus counselor. However, since this incident, we decided after speaking with Jason and Gail that we should not send medication home even with bus counselors and in an ideal situation, because we would rather families come pick it up. So we have now changed our policies to include, well, a whole bunch of stuff. So the policies are all changing so that our documentation procedures are more clear. I think that part of the issue is our policies were always to be following the regulations, and our policies had always been that all medication is documented in the logs, that the time and according to what the Board of Health requires. What apparently had happened is over time, nurses who have been with us for a while, and I can't say that this is true of all the nurses, but in some cases, the nurses would unilaterally, in their professional expertise, adapt our policies and what they should be doing. We realize that our policies, while written out, didn't have clear procedures that were written out. They were discussed with nurses upon hire and at training, and then we relied on them to follow those procedures when they'd been with us for a long time. We realize now that that is absolutely not what we should be doing, and that we should be documenting what our procedures are as well in our policies. So to have the policy written out as well as what our expected procedures are, and to reiterate those seasonally, because even if our staff is with us for many seasons, it is a seasonal job. And so they come back after some time away, and they come back from other jobs where they may have other practices. And so it's important for us to convey what our expectations are. And I mention that because the nurse in question here did work at a school that did send medications home in backpacks. Not all the time, but apparently they did do that on occasion. And so she then extrapolated from that and brought that procedure here without our knowledge or agreement with that procedure. So we are now making clear we're documenting very carefully what our procedures are, and we plan to go over it annually at the beginning of each season with our nurses. We're developing a staff manual as well as handing nurses policies. We are handing them a manual that will clearly instruct them how they're supposed to return medications as well as every other medical procedure. And that will be ready for next summer. For right now, for the immediacy, because we did recognize how important this is and was, the nurses were given new protocols, or not new protocols, but newly written protocols of what the expectation was with regard to medication. It also came to my attention that this same nurse had, or the nurses had decided, but I think it came from that same nurse, had decided that a more effective way for managing medications with the volume that we have, which incidentally, I don't know if you're aware, we have over 800 campers a day, and many of whom take medication. They had printed out a list of the daily medications rather than rely on just memory and campers coming into the office to take their medication and then documenting it. They printed out proactively a list of who was supposed to be taking medications each day. And it had the time and it had the name of the camper where they were. I think it was great that they printed out that list. What I was not aware of, and we became aware of, is that they were throwing out that list at the end of the day, rather than attaching it into the log or copying it into the log and maintaining it. So we immediately corrected that that unofficial procedure as well, and made clear that even if they print out a list, which does make sense, and that's for managing the medications, that they attach it or document it in the medical log. So it will be retained. And the issue that happened with Eve's child, which was extremely unfortunate, and I apologize, and I absolutely feel for her not knowing how much medication her child did take. I think I do take umbrage with the fact that she thought that we were dismissive of that, and I'm sorry she felt that way. I know that we worked, Liam and the nurses worked hard to determine how much medication the child took and were responsive with that. We couldn't state clearly or accurately, as Eve pointed out, because it wasn't documented, but the nurses did know how much was given each day, and it varied between 2 doses. And so we were able to provide a range. So it was clear that I believe it was under 8. It was between 6 and 8 doses that were left in the box, and then that were sent home in the box. And then we knew how many were left in the box from Eve. So we were able to extrapolate roughly how much of the medication was taken. That's still not to excuse what happened. Clearly, the medication should not have gone in the child's backpack.
All right, so would anyone else from Grossman like to speak at this point?
I'd like
Not someone.
Yep. So I'm Catherine Ruggieri. I'm the interim CFAO. I just wanted to respond and say, immediately upon this happening, Leslie and Liam put in an incident report as is our practice, and immediately discussed with us at the JCC, put in the incident report with the Board of Health and called DCF, and all that to say that we take this incredibly seriously. We care deeply about the health and safety of the children in our care, both at Camp Grossman and at the other programs at the JCC. And it was clear to me that Leslie and Liam both took this incredibly seriously and immediately put in practice a review and identified immediate actions, and then continued to dig in, work with Jason and Gail to identify what else could change and what else could improve. We are also, as an organization, undertaking a comprehensive risk audit this year before next summer for Camp Grossman. So a little bit speaking to, Jason's comment that there has been an uptick of incidents. Now, things are going to happen with 800 kids in camp, and yet there is absolutely an opportunity for us to mitigate that risk and manage that risk effectively in order to reduce any incidents. So we take that very, very seriously, and we are undertaking that comprehensive risk audit. It has started with these medication policies and will continue to other areas of the camp as well. Not to say that we are going to be able to eliminate any risks, because that's not possible, but we do hope to identify where we can strengthen our procedures, our policies, our training, and our responsiveness and communication to reduce these incidences and just manage them more effectively when they do happen. So I just wanted to chime in with that.
Could I interrupt? I also wanted to add two things. One, with regard to incidents, I think that, yeah, there's always going to be incidents. And I think that maybe the uptick in incidents is possibly a result of our better documentation, to be honest with you. Children break bones, children fall, children get hurt at camp. And I don't think there's been any issue thus far this year, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, where there was a question of whether we were to blame with regard to any of that uptick in incidents. We're doing a better job of documenting. The other thing is I want to say about contacting DCF, that I believe in erring on the side of caution in all instances, and as Catherine pointed out, we all are looking out for the interests of the children, and we are wanting to make sure that everyone is safe. And we also believe in mea culpa. And I think that it was important to me that we notify DCF, because as I understand the role of DCF, it's not to say that we were negligent or not. I'm calling DCF to let them make the determination, because that's DCF's role. That's not my determination. My determination is if there's any reason to believe that we put a child in jeopardy, then we contact DCF. So, we've contacted DCF. We contact DCF proactively, not necessarily saying that we thought that we in fact poisoned a child or that we were being negligent. So I just wanted to point that out, that I would always err on that side of letting DCF make that determination, because that's their role. And the same thing is true for the Board of Health. We are very upfront and honest with Jason and Gail about what happens at camp. And that's very important to me, to be able to maintain that trust. And I think that Jason and Gail do trust us to notify them, and being deceptive or evasive is not actually in my vocabulary. I can't do that even if I try. And I actually we've made it a point to have that open and honest relationship, because we want their assistance. Since the incident, and actually since 2 years ago, we have reached out to Jason and Gail whenever we've had questions about what we're doing, so that we can follow best practices, and where and we've also we've connected with the ACA nurses to make sure that we're following best practices as well, because that is extremely important.
Thank you. Anyone else from Grossman want to speak? Eve?
Hi, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things. So when I called the camp immediately after seeing that my son had ingested an unknown quantity of medication, I asked how much was in the bag. And the nurses had left for the day. Liam was very responsive in trying to help me approximate how much, but I never received any confirmation from the camp about what the range was. We did our best to guess, Liam and I together, before he had spoken to the nurses about how much was likely to have been ingested, assuming the medication had been faithfully administered. But there was never any kind of follow-up from the camp once they had confirmed with the records or the nurses, because as I'm now learning for the first time, there were in fact no records. So I just want to make that clear. That was never, I never received any kind of official follow-up from the camp. I had to do my best to feel confident in the approximation that Liam and I made together without the benefit of knowing from the nurses or the records that they kept, which he was at camp and could have accessed had they been there. The other thing was, Catherine was saying that they were responsive to my concerns and providing information. We actually had a meeting following the incident because I thought it was best to give the camp an opportunity to explain themselves before I decided what action I wanted to take. And they, Catherine was explaining that they had an ongoing investigation. They couldn't provide any information relating to the ongoing investigation. And I asked, you know, how did my son get access to the medication? And she said, someone put it in his backpack. And I said, when did they put it in his backpack? Just so I could figure out, like, you know, what the time period was that he could have overdosed in relation to his earlier time. And she said, we cannot give you that information. It's part of an ongoing investigation. I asked other questions and she said she could not share that information. It was part of an ongoing investigation. And then she never followed up to provide answers to those detailed questions. Of course, the medical necessity had diminished by the time I eventually did hear back from her weeks later. But I just want to make it clear, there was an opportunity that the camp had to be very transparent in basic information relating to my son's medical care that would have been helpful to have had immediately following the incident that they declined to provide, which was unfortunate from my standpoint. And that led ultimately to my decision to pull my son from the camp midsummer.
I'm not sure how important this is, but it's important to me that in no instance did we intentionally decline to provide any information. I knew, I think Catherine didn't know, and but I certainly knew, Liam certainly knew that the medication put in the backpack happened at the buses, as that is when medications should have been given that are to be returned, should have been given to a bus counselor. So the medication was put into the backpack at the time of the buses. And so his access, we did know the time that he had access to that backpack. So it was between the time he boarded the bus at 4:15, in between 4:15 and 4 until he got home and it was discovered that he had taken it. So I'm sorry that that information wasn't conveyed. And I think
Liam was present at the meeting and he did not say anything. So I'm not sure why. But again, it's just another example of communication, poor communication impacting my child's health outcomes. And so that was very, very upsetting to me. And the other thing is that the decision to, you know, destroy records after giving medication and to, like, this was not just one nurse doing her own thing, it was the nursing staff. And so it also sounds like they're intending to have the same nursing staff come back. I understand people make mistakes, but there were so many things that were wrong here. I think that also goes, I know that's beyond the purview of this public hearing and what the Board of Health does, but to me, it demonstrates how serious the camp is taking this issue. And again, to have nurses who are violating, even if it's for their current schools, there's no situation where it's okay to be breaking public safety, public health regulations, and no circumstances where it's okay to administer medication to children in this way, even if that was the practice at the prior school. And so I think that's also troubling, where you would have medication stored outside of its original packaging, not have documentation on whether medication had been given, how much had been given. You know, this is more than just one rogue nurse, because the other nurse should have noticed that the medication was, you know, not kept in a compliant manner and in a dangerous way. And then again, like, my son didn't just show up to the nurse's office by himself. Like, he's 5, he's escorted there. Like, other nurses are in the same vicinity. They see that someone's putting medication in the backpack. And I don't have the insight into the investigation that Camp Grossman did, because they declined to provide any information to me. But I guess that is also quite troubling, that there was really no thought as to how to keep children safe from people who are not able to reliably follow public health guidelines and regulations, and apparently camp policy and procedures.
John?
So, you know, Eve, I appreciate how difficult going through this has been. But I want to step back from this a little bit, because listening to, what Jason said, what you said, what people from the camp have said, I think there are, probably 3 things that have sort of come up with me as I've listened to all of this. And, one is, I think there's some issues that have come out of this that have been identified that point to communication issues between parents and campers. And we heard a little bit about some of the things that have been, steps that have been taken to address that. There might also be some internal communication issues, which probably bear some looking into. But I think that's one set of things that we should think about and talk about a little bit. The second one, which again has been addressed a little bit, and I know Jason has been working with the camp on this, is possible problems with policies and training for some of the staff, making sure everybody understands what's happening and everybody's on board and those policies are followed. And that, there's reasonable oversight to ensure that the policies are both appropriate and adhered to. And then the third thing that really struck me with what Leslie was telling us is that there are a large number of campers, many of them are taking medicine. And, a lot of that has to be administered by the nurse. So, the question I would have that I'd like to hear the Camp Grossman and JCC staff members talk about a little bit is, whether or not this nursing group is understaffed. And Gail's perspective on this might be really good too. Do you need a slightly bigger nursing staff to be able to handle this volume? I would suspect that the number of campers has probably grown a little bit over the years. So probably the number of campers taking medication has probably grown dramatically. So maybe, that's something that's worth rethinking a little bit too.
I have a related question, which is, I would like to hear about the administrative structure of your nursing service. Who do you have a designated head nurse? And if not, who is overseeing the nurses?
Thank you for all those questions. So with regard, I'll start there, actually, it's easiest. So the nursing structure, the nursing structure is such that we have recently changed. Yes, we have grown over the years. We had 1 nurse a long time ago. Now we have 3 nurses, 2 of whom are actual registered nurses, and 1 of whom is an EMT and does not administer medication. So we do have 3 nurses on staff, and almost always have 3 on site if somebody calls in sick. And we also have a sub list for nurses. So we attempt to have 3 people on site at all times. There are times when it goes down to 2. I will say that the busyness of it is Eve's suggestion, which I understand that one would think that maybe the other nurses would see that something went into a backpack. Our busyness actually does mean that no, the other nurses did not know anything about what medication was going home in a backpack, because the medications are taken up by a nurse. If they were in the past, if they were going home with the bus counselor, then they were going up with a nurse. And so this particular nurse had just gone up. So other nurses wouldn't have known that it went into the backpack. In terms of the number of staff, we do believe that the 3 is is actually sufficient for the day. I appreciate you asking that, John. But we do believe that 3 is sufficient, as most of the day is pretty quiet, and it's a matter of making sure that we have enough people to make sure that all the medications are given. It is busy. It is busy during those times, in the middle of the day, and also as we've increased with campers, it's not just that, as you can imagine. In today's world, there are more and more children on medications, and so there is a lot to manage, but we do believe that we have the right amount of staff. In terms of the structure, as we grew, the nurses were equal, and there was no clear head nurse, although there was the healthcare supervisor who was one of the assistant directors, and that assistant director oversaw the nurses. Last summer was her last summer, incidentally. So this summer, Liam became in charge of overseeing the nurses, but we also knew that having a team of nurses without somebody within who was in charge was not the structure that we wanted. I felt strongly that we should have one nurse in charge. One nurse was put in charge this summer. However, admittedly, it did not seem that the nursing office, as after this incident, we realized that the nursing office really embraced and understood that. They were 3 equals the year before, and that can be difficult to change and to suddenly have one person who was in charge. And I'm not sure, it was certainly documented in our staffing structure, but whether that was really internalized, I cannot say. We have changed that and made very clear who is in charge since, or we did, for the summer is basically over. We did clarify who was in charge. The nurse in question is no longer with us and will not be returning in the future. But the person we have designated as a head nurse is with us, and we have found since that incident, Eve, it's very clear that she is absolutely committed to following all of the rules and the regulations and the policies, and is working very closely with us. The other thing that we implemented that I didn't say before is that per the regulations, the nursing staff, if they're registered nurses, do not need to meet with the healthcare consultant, who is our doctor, with whom we have a great relationship. And instead, we've had the doctor meet with people who are not registered nurses to have everyone sort of rise to the level of the ability to be a healthcare supervisor to cover us in any cases that we would need to have someone else act as healthcare supervisor. But we also have now implemented that the head nurse and the registered nurses will also meet with the healthcare consultant each year at the beginning of the year when others of us meet with the healthcare consultant, to make sure that that's part of the ongoing training, and to make sure that we are refreshing the recollection of how we're supposed to behave and the policies and protocols at camp. So I think I answered most of that. Were there more questions, John?
Well, a few other things have come up in this discussion, and I really appreciate the way you've been responding to this, Leslie. You know, I've been involved with many organizations that have grown over time, and as they grow, you know, the solutions that worked when you were small often don't scale. And, you know, one of the things, you know, and I didn't know that Grossman was affiliated with the JCC, which has a lot of really wonderful programs they run too. And, you know, one question, which is sort of a side question, is any of your nursing staff also working on programs at JCC? Because if there was that, no, okay. I mean, that kind of thing might provide some level of continuity, just in terms of staffing, so you know who the people are and they don't have to get up to speed every year. But, you know, given the large volume and what I can imagine is a pretty, you know, pretty substantial daily burden with managing all this medication. And given the fact that you have to manage a lot of health records coming in anyway when students are registering, right? You have to get their vaccination records and everything else. Do you have any kind of software that you're using to manage this? I discovered something called CampDoc just really quickly, you know, and it seems like the more you can automate the management of this complex set of tasks, you know, the better off that would be. it doesn't necessarily address the parent communications issues where, it seems like you've identified some places where it broke down in particular with Eve and her family. But, sort of automating as much of that as possible might really help you navigate challenges in the future.
Yeah, thank you. We do manage our all of our documentation. We use CampMinder, not CampDoc. And so we have all of the health records in CampMinder, and it has made it operationally a lot easier to go through those thousands of records that we need to go through before camp begins. And those records were all gone through. Just incidentally, I know Eve also mentioned that it seemed like no one had read the records. I think that it is someone had read all the records. I want to indicate the nurses split it up. We have a whole system. The month of June, they are going through every single camp record, making notes. It may not have been the specific nurse that you spoke with. I think that is some of the areas of communication. I know there were the issues with the phone calls, and I knew of one issue with the phone call. I only heard from Eve today that there were more, but we do have systems in place, and there were a number of things that went wrong that we identified. I can get into all of it, but the sign-up sheet for the nurse appointments was left on inadvertently after we had closed and printed out and gotten the information to the nurses. That's what happened there. So it's truly unfortunate that all of these things would happen to one family. And I can understand, not in my wildest dreams would I believe me if I was saying this, that it isn't more pervasive, but it really did seem that a number of these issues happened to the same family. And this is Murphy's Law, and I've seen it happen a number of times. And it's terrible, and I regret that Eve had to have this experience. But we do have systems in place, and we go through in detail constantly going over our systems. And I think that part of it, as you sort of alluded to, John, is that that we go through as we've grown and as we've had changes. I just said the assistant director left, and so so then Liam is now taking over. We're relying on what was taught in the past because we had all returning nurses, and we realized we should not have done that. And so we have taken those steps to correct and make sure that we're training even our experienced staff year after year. And I love what you said about the nurses. I wish there were an opportunity to have a nurse who was affiliated with the JCC, but the JCC doesn't have a year-round or have need to have a year-round nurse on staff. But we do, incidentally, that's something I also had thought of, and that's how we handle almost everything else we do. We have a huge special needs population at camp, for instance, and we have worked with the JCC as a whole to try and have some year-round consistency so that our families are actually getting the same level of service for the special needs kids throughout the year when they're enrolled in the off-season programs.
I have a number of questions also. Steve, do you have questions? And John, do you
No.
before I,
At this juncture, no.
John, do you have more? Shall I proceed? I mean, feel free to interrupt me. I mean,
At some point, since Liam's taken over, this, oversight role, I'd love to hear his perspective too. But why don't you ask your questions now, Kay?
Okay, I have a number of questions about the nursing service, and I'd like to ask the woman, the nurse who's been identified as your head nurse or lead. Does she have leadership experience?
I actually don't know what her experience. I know she works as a school nurse. I don't know what her leadership experience is.
Because I asked that question because it's one thing to be a nurse and be thrust into a leadership position. It's another to have leadership training and experience, and there's a world of difference.
Yep.
And I think that's an important issue to address. I think you're, I'm not an expert in camp health, but I know something about it, and hearing this, I would like to know when you have your lead nurse, head nurse, begin her work each year, and whether she is responsible for the oversight of the other nurses. Does she hire nurses? Does she act as a supervisor and do annual reviews and meet with them regularly, or is that a non-medical person who's doing that?
So right now, as I said, we made her the head nurse this year, and so that is those are excellent points that you raise about leadership, and I think that is it's hard for me to say whether this, I think we will be monitoring very closely with this nurse, how she acts and if she has the capacity to act as a leader next summer. In the meantime, there will be a much closer oversight still from Liam and myself with regard to the nursing office so that we can establish that. Really, I think that the lead probably comes from or our reason for thinking that she should be the lead is, well, first, by default, she's the only returning nurse who is now coming back because the other nurse will not be returning. So we'll be hiring a brand new nurse. Our thought is that nurse would stay the leader. And we did see leadership skills in owning what was happening in the nursing office once we made it very clear and after the other nurse left. But your point is well taken, and I think that we do need to go over what kind of leadership skills she has and perhaps give some leadership training. In terms of how she works with us, she worked with us this is a tough question. She worked with us officially in June. Unofficially, from behind the scenes, she would work with us throughout the year on developing, in discussing policy and procedure, I believe. But I'm going to let Liam speak to that because Liam spoke with her and is the one who interacted with her.
What you talked, I think it was you, or what, maybe it was Catherine who mentioned that you're undergoing a risk audit.
Yeah.
Does that involve bringing in outside consultants?
We haven't determined yet exactly how we're going to approach it. We are, first looking at our existing policies and practices. We have another camp at our Newton campus. And so we will compare, policies and practices at that camp, Grossman, work to identify where there may be gaps, where there may be opportunities to be strengthened. We very well may bring in an outside consultant. As you know, risk has a wide variety of factors. For the medication and healthcare components, we will rely on our healthcare consultants, the doctor that we consult with to assess and to review carefully. There are security components to risk. There are, as you mentioned, communication components to risk. There's systemic components. Leslie mentioned we're on CampMinder. We transitioned to CampMinder 2 years ago, and we are continuing to ramp up our usage of that system. It's a very robust system and has features that we have not fully made use of. And so there's opportunities in there to continue growing our usage of that automatic system. So I think that risk audit will be, wide ranging, and camp is just now ending. And so we're working on what does that look like over the next few months.
By the way, is your clinical director, is that the term for the physician?
Healthcare consultant is Dr. Stone.
Is Dr. Stone aware of the incident?
Absolutely. We've been in touch with Dr. Stone repeatedly, and that is who we would, barring any beyond this supervision or oversight for our risk management, we would have been consulting. We would have personally just been consulting with Dr. Stone and with Jason and Gail.
So I'm going to give you my opinion, which is not that of the board because this is not something we voted on, but it's my opinion that you have a serious problem with your nursing service. You've identified a nurse as your leader who doesn't have leadership experience, and the other people involved in oversight of your nursing service are not healthcare providers. And I would say that as a consequence, you're doing your best. I don't mean that you're not. I think you're really trying hard, and I think you have great intentions. And your goal is to do the best job you can. You're a quality organization. But I think that you're set up not to know what you don't know. If you don't have a leader a leader for your service who knows camp nursing and has demonstrated leadership skills. And it would be my recommendation personally to you that you bring in a consultant in camp healthcare to advise you about how to change that. Because I think otherwise you're not going to know, you're going to be on shaky ground going forward.
Yeah, I think somebody, we have consulted with Tracy Goslin, who is the nurse consultant for the American Camping Association. So she has been somebody that we've consulted with in the past and relied on her expertise. And so that is something that we should definitely talk about, and then finding a nurse for who may have this the camping experience and then the leadership experience as well.
So
I'm curious about what kind of leadership experience a nurse, just from your perspective, what kind of leadership experience would a nurse have that we would be seeking?
Well, leadership in, I'd be interested in Gail's thoughts about this too, but I would say I mean, ideally in camp leadership, but it's hard to find people like that, but somebody who, I think the camp nursing issues overlap with school nursing issues and with college health nursing issues to some extent, but more with school health because of the age of the clients that you have. But I think what really counts is experience, understanding policies and protocols, how to create and implement them and make sure that they're being followed, and how to supervise, hire and supervise nurses. And those are areas of expertise that non-nurses aren't going to have. Physicians don't have. So, and Gail, any thoughts hearing me say that?
I would add, with the leadership, someone who develops competencies and performance standards for the nurses that are not just one and done, but periodic throughout the season. Understanding, because camp regulations, particularly in the area of health requirements, change. And seasoned nurses that come back still have to demonstrate those competencies to be able to perform and adhere throughout the season.
I would agree with what Gail said. I think that those are important points too.
Gail, are you suggesting that the head nurse be one who has experience doing that, or are you suggesting those as two separate things? One, have somebody who is consulting with us on the leadership side, and then also that we make sure that then that new leader is developing the competencies.
Ideally, that he has the capacity to do competencies and understand how to implement them.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yes, I agree. That sounds wonderful. And I also want to be realistic about what happens in these seasonal jobs, and what kind of an applicant pool and what level of qualification someone has beyond being a registered nurse. Already having a registered nurse is above and beyond what's even required for a day camp, right? And we consider ourselves lucky to have 2 registered nurses and an EMT. And so I just want to make clear that while I love your idea, and in an ideal, that is 100% what we would be looking for, I just want to be realistic about the fact that that person may not exist. I mean, people take registered nurses who are generally school nurses. That's who comes along for a seasonal camp job.
So I put a few things in the chat. One of the things, while we were talking, I looked at CampMinder a little bit. They actually have apps for managing medication. They're tablet enabled. It seems like using that, really buying into electronic medical record keeping would be great. I'm sure they have things for checking kids in and out. I've seen things like that at schools where, you drop the kids off and they get checked in electronically. I especially saw that during COVID. It might make sense if you bought into that system to consider having one of their consultants come out and actually work with you to identify what the problems are, optimize the implementation, and then before camp next year, do some training so that everybody who's going to be working at camp knows how to work the apps. I see Shani has her hand up, and then Eve also put in the chat, which I think is a reasonable suggestion too, that there's no parent-facing handbook for camp, and it would be good to have some of that with the policies and procedures laid out.
Yeah, that is actually in the works, and Genevieve, that was ideally going to be accomplished this year. What we have and is a lot of different policies and paperwork and stuff that we do send and provide in CampMinder. So there are most of the information, or a lot of the information that we want to get out to families is given out to families, but it is in fact, she's right, piecemeal, and the handbook will be developed by this year.
I just
That's
wanted to
prioritized by the JCC and by us as our top goal.
I just wanted to address the CampMinders. We do use the CampMinder logging system and medication administration records and all of that with our camp that is on our campus here. And that's part of the work that Catherine was talking about in terms of, figuring out how to align our systems and align our procedures.
And that's
And I'm sorry, and we do have 2 people going to CampMinder camp this fall, which is where they go to a CampMinder puts on a conference. It's funny, but they share best practices, and we have 2 people already signed up to go and bring back that knowledge. And one of those people is the person at our camp who is designated as in charge and the expert on CampMinder. And actually, funnily enough, she's such an expert that CampMinder themselves call her to learn how to best improve their own systems.
Well, but it sounds like some of the, training, not everything is implemented at Grossman, and that some of the training is not flowing down, right?
Correct.
If the medication records weren't tracked electronically so that, you couldn't let Eve know about what doses had been given, clearly the system needs some optimization.
Yeah, I think that was a discussion that we had anticipated having with Jason about whether it was sufficient to maintain the logs in that way, in electronically instead of having a paper log that had everything that happened each day, if it was okay to be tracking everything within the camper profile, which is where it would be, and then there would not be a daily log.
Did you have a question or comment, Steve?
Yes, I'd like to see you folks have an outside specialty organization look over your medication administration procedures and share those findings with you and see what best you can do to implement improvement. And I'd like to see our Board of Health be part of that before camp begins next year and reviewing what procedures have been put into place to improve that system.
That'd be great. Do you have a sense of what kind of outside organization does that?
I suspect there are consultant organizations that do that. It was said earlier, and maybe I misunderstood, that you'd already administered some internal review, but you intended to have an outside review. I assume that's the case.
I had intended to have Dr. Stone or Jason review and the board as well. Do you mean beyond that?
I think beyond that. I think you really do need to have some organization that specializes in that particular body of knowledge and see if the best practices can be implemented and before the next camp season.
Yeah, we can.
If there are changes necessary.
Now let's,
which there were.
We could talk to Tracy from ACA if that's sort of what you're suggesting. I don't know.
I think that sounds like an interesting way to begin. So Tracy what is her position at the ACA?
She's the, I don't know her title, I'm sorry, but it's the nurse. She's essentially the nurse person who the head nurse person. We used to talk to her a lot during COVID.
Does the ACA do any consulting? I would imagine they don't, but
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
They may know about groups that do it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I can talk with them.
I understand that it's hard to hire nurses. But if you have them, I think you have to have the best protocols in place and the best leadership structure in place that you're going to have. And if you don't have nurses because you're not required to have nurses, then you have to have a tight ship also in terms of how you oversee your program of administering meds.
Oh no, we fully plan to always have nurses, and we haven't had trouble getting the nurses. It was that next level of, my point was that having registered nurses, I think there was some belief, certainly on my part, that if I'm hiring a registered nurse, that they have some degree of professional expertise and competencies that would allow them to administer medication. And that's, I mean, reading the regulations implies that, right? They say that, they specifically say in the regulations that if you have a registered nurse, there's no need for them to meet with a healthcare consultant. So my interpretation of that was their professional expertise and licensure should be enough. So I think that what we're learning is, no, it shouldn't be enough.
Well, it's enough if you're a small camp with one nurse and one healthcare consultant, right? But because there's no problem about communication among the staff and how they work together, but you're big enough that if you have 3 people on site at once, somebody should be in charge of that.
Oh, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. And I think that I made that decision last year that once our old person, assistant director who was in charge of the nursing staff, and I had to become a little bit more involved in understanding how it worked, knew that you can't have a team without a leader. It doesn't make sense. Somebody has to be in charge. And so absolutely somebody needs to be in charge. I was more concerned with the experience level and what the ideal, the realistic experience level and the ideal experience level of that registered nurse supervisor should be. And that's where I think there may be.
I think your points are well taken, though, that, you know, Leslie is correct that there's challenges in hiring, and there may be ceilings as to how much supervisory experience we may be able to get for a seasonal position. But we do have plenty of supervisory experience within the JCC, and we can put through outside consulting support, through our internal risk assessment support, we can put better practices in place for training, for performance management. We can understand more clearly what the competencies necessary are for the nursing staff and require those annually. So there are clear opportunities for us to continue to build and strengthen. I think both Kay and John, you have hit the nail on the head that we have grown as a camp, and the world has become more complex. And there is an opportunity for us to step into that more fully. What worked for us many years ago is no longer working for us now. And we are all very committed to identifying how we can make best use of the systems and the policies around us to improve upon that.
I would add one thing to your list, and that is that I don't know that there are professional meetings for camp nurses, but I would imagine that there are. And that this is where the ACA could probably help you as well to identify those, because I think I would recommend that your lead nurse be attending meetings like that, so that as a way of being able to stay up on developments in the field and connected to colleagues who would be of support.
Yeah, I think we'll look through the ACA. I do go to a lot of conferences and I belong to a lot of consortiums. And before you even said this, when I was thinking, is there ever anything for nurses at any of our seminars? And to be honest with you, there's not. It's mental health, but I haven't seen anything with regard to nurses. And I think that honestly, there is some level of expectation out there, maybe that the licensure, the fact that they're a registered nurse is enough broadly. But I will absolutely speak with Tracy and the ACA about that, because I agree with you, having a consortium makes all the difference for anybody in a professional role to be able to see what other people are doing and what best practices are, and to have that support. Thank you.
And if there aren't ways to get that with other camp nurses, then school
Maybe
nurses.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that suggestion of trying to get somebody to take a look at the camp and really come up with a list of best practices. Because I think it'll help address a whole bunch of issues, probably, things that we haven't talked about that may actually help you run a better and more efficient camp overall too.
Mhm.
Are there any other comments or questions that people have? I think you've addressed my issues. Leslie, you were about to say something?
I realized that I don't think that you got to hear from Liam, if you still wanted to.
Yeah. Anything you would like to add?
Oh, sorry, I have to mute myself so that he.
Hey everyone. So John, I and Eve specifically, the miscommunications at the beginning of the year were absolutely my fault. It was me using a system that I never used before. And I apologize for that, right? I used it as a learning opportunity so that next year when we're using the system, either we change it or I change my practices, right? I think coming out of all of this, it's been, you have to look at everything as a learning opportunity and an opportunity to say, what did you do incorrectly? What did you not know about? How to fix things that you do know about, and then how to start to anticipate the things that you couldn't possibly know, right? I think this was highly unfortunate, and I regret the fact that, we miscommunicated right off the bat with Eve, and for that, I'm sorry. I regret the fact that the nurses told her one thing about administering the laxative medication, and then we told her another, and it wasn't really we at no point in that were working together. We were working as independent units, and ultimately that rolls uphill to me and what should have been my leadership there, right? So I regret that, and I need to take that as a learning opportunity as well, right? People were working in, again, their own separate discrete groups, and we weren't communicating well. And then when we did communicate, it came together. We made a plan with Eve, and then it misfired. And unfortunately, our 17-year-old counselor was handed the note that said, this is when the child took the medication and put it in her backpack and not hit right. It was just a series of really, really unfortunate events that led to a scary event for Eve, right? Again, I apologize for those miscommunications. I recognize that I need to understand how to make sure my team is communicating with each other, and more importantly with me. And then, just going forward, making sure that we're auditing and trying to figure out, again, the things that we know that we messed up, and the things that we don't know about yet, but we're looking forward, or trying to get ahead of and anticipating issues. Do you have any specific questions?
No, I appreciate the candor.
Oh, sorry, hold on. You're like completely, yeah. 1 second.
That's because I
John,
had it up.
yeah.
I can put my-
No, let me turn my volume on. Sorry, Leslie. Yeah, that's trying to do the dance of two people in the same room, because we do have camp this week and it is still busy in the office. So, all right, I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
No, I just said I appreciate the candor, Liam.
Okay.
Are there other people who'd like to speak? So I would like to thank everyone for being here and for being very candid about what's gone on, and that includes Eve and her discussion about what happened with her son. And she's raised some issues that are very important that obviously are issues that the camp needs to delve into and we assume we'll be delving into. I think I would like to see us meet with you sooner rather than later, and perhaps periodically about the year to hear about what you're doing. Maybe to have you come back to meet with the board, perhaps to talk with Jason and Gail periodically. John and Steve, do you agree with that? Steve, how about you? Is that a yes? I couldn't hear.
Yes, from me.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we'll be in touch about when we get together next. And obviously, you should feel free to be in touch with Jason and Gail about to tap into their expertise and opinions about things in the meantime.
Oh, yeah, that's sorry. That is and has been the plan to be in touch with Gail and Jason, and then we welcome the opportunity to be able to engage with you as well and make sure we're all on the same page throughout this year where we document really everything.
Okay. We appreciate your we appreciate that you really are forthright with us and that you let us know about problems before we hear about them in other ways. And I think we want to support you in process improvement. That's the goal. It's to have things improve. It's not for us to be punitive in any way, but to help for us to be sure that we understand you're moving forward in terms of improving things at the camp, and that you will be in touch with us about that, and that we'll
Absolutely.
advise about that to the extent that we can.
And I take it that way. I heard it that way. Thank you. We definitely have always seen Jason as a partner, and I look at you as obviously you're the overseers as well, but you also are having your overseer partner with you so that you can make sure that you have all your ducks in a row is very important, and I look at it that way. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other thoughts? All right, then we are going to move to the second item on our agenda, and thank you all for coming.
Yeah, and actually, Kay, if I could just say one last thing to kind of bring us
Sure.
home before we move on here. First of all, I want to thank Eve. I know I really didn't have a chance to speak with you much myself, but I know you were in communication with Gail and some folks in our office. So I appreciate you staying in touch with us and bringing this to our attention in the first place. And as far as the Camp Grossman folks, this was my third or fourth summer with you guys. We've always had a good working relationship. You guys have always been great about communication. Yes, some things like a few of the things outlined here have come up, but credit to you guys. Any instance like this that has ever happened, you've been on top of it, implemented any necessary corrective actions. I know when we met a few weeks ago, when Gail and I came out, we worked through some of the corrective action stuff. So I just want to thank you guys as well for very obviously taking this stuff seriously, working with us, and just kind of doing your best to navigate through all of this. I know summer camp is not at all easy. I sure as heck could not do it. I don't envy at all what you guys do. So just again, thank you for working with us. So I guess we'll meet again prior to next camp season. We'll make sure I'm comfortable with your policies. We'll make sure board's comfortable with your policies. And we'll kind of go from there. We'll go into next year fresh, and we'll be better. You guys will be better, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks everyone for attending. So we move on to our next agenda item. So that is the MBTA Communities Act motion. And I need to pull that up unless Jason or Gail, not Gail, Jason or Suzanne, do you have it in front of you? If not, I can,
I do not.
pardon?
A written outline for it, I have the agenda in front of me, but not any other material.
Okay, hang on a second.
Well, so I guess how do you want to do this, Kate? Do you just kind of want to set it up a little bit and just give a brief explanation, or do you want to
Yeah.
pull up the full details of it? What do you want to do?
Well, I want to go ahead and send you, I want to send something to Suzanne so that she can pull this up. Hang on a second. Suzanne, I'm going to forward this to you. You don't have to pull it up yet, but I want you to have it available. Okay, so John, you were at the MBTA Communities Act discussion at the planning board last night. Steve, I take it you've kept up with this issue.
Yes, actually, the town on its website has a pretty good précis or a summary of what's
Yeah.
transpired as of this morning.
I would agree. Actually, I don't know about as of this morning, but
I mean, they're up to date.
they're up to date. So, so in anticipation of town meeting, the special town meeting in September, the planning board would like all boards and committees in the town, if they're willing to do this, to vote their approval of the idea, so that they can present at town meeting that in fact the boards and committees are supportive. So Carol Lisbon has drafted a motion for us that I just sent to Suzanne. Do you have it, Suzanne? Did it come through?
I got it. Did you want me to screen share or anything?
Or you could just,
Please.
or your screen share, yeah, either one.
And you can also throw it in the chat if you want. That'd be fine. But
I'm
screen
not
share.
sure if I got the entire message. It says below is the motion. Actually, yes, I do have it. Sorry. I was reading it incorrectly. Can you see that? Just the email?
It's there.
No, it needs to be in larger type, please.
Sorry, now it's cut off. Okay. Let me know if you can see that.
I can read it. The Board of Health supports the draft MBTA Communities Act bylaw and overlay district on file with the Dover Town Clerk and urges a yes vote at the September 29th, 2025 special town meeting.
Does this take into account the selection of the Tisdale area as the preferred district by the planning board?
Yes,
I think that's what the whole thing is, right?
Yeah.
that's what's in the draft bylaw.
Okay.
Now you could take it down now, Suzanne, thanks. So is it, Steve, you have,
Well, this feels Trumpian, but even though it does, in terms of the way it's being done, I do agree with the selection of the planning board in terms of that district and how far they've gone thus far. I'm ill at ease being on record to that because I think we might at some juncture change our minds. The Tisdale people haven't had much of a voice, so I think we yet have to hear from them in adequate numbers to see what their true feelings are.
John, do you have any thoughts?
Well, you know, I was at the meeting last night. I think they made the planning board made a pretty good case that, you know, the two options are basically approve this plan or don't approve anything and kind of let, you know, developers run roughshod over the town because we wouldn't be able to prevent a lot of things from happening. It gives us a lot more control over, you know, implementing changes going forward and managing town affairs. So I think it makes a great deal of sense to support this.
I'll weigh in too. I support it. There are reasons you could argue it's not the best location, but and it was interesting. One of the members of the planning board last night mentioned that there are people in town who would argue that this is not an effective way of increasing the amount of high density housing in Dover because it's an overlay district in an area that already has high density housing. Someone from the Concom said that that's a good thing because it doesn't reduce the amount of open space in town. So there are varying opinions. No one spoke. I've not heard anyone speak from Tisdale Drive about this. So I'm not aware of a group in town that opposes it based on that. And of course it's just a zoning district. It's not a development plan. So I think that it actually seems improbable to me that it ever would be redeveloped that way, but so be it. And I agree that if the town doesn't pass this, we're in some trouble financially because there's no recourse to complying with the act without incurring significant financial damage. So I'm in favor of this. So I'm ready to entertain a motion that we pass the motion as John read it. Who wants to make a motion in second?
I move that we approve. Do you want to put that back up? Just for a second. Suzanne. I move that we state that the Board of Health supports the draft MBTA Communities Act bylaw and overlay district on file, the Dover Town Clerk, and urge a yes vote at the September 29, 2025 special town meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye, Kay Peterson.
Aye, John Quackenbush.
Aye, Stephen Krusko.
Okay, and should we can we have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
Can we just, we skipped one part of the agenda about our next meeting. Could we just circle back to that?
Yes. That's the date of the next meeting.
Yeah, we're all good for it. I just wanted to confirm that that's still
What's the date, please?
September 8th.
September 8th.
That happens to be my son's birthday, but
Well, you know what? I
can work around that.
it's like a
Assuming
private-
we've got a meeting.
I have a conflict as well. No, I don't. I might. I don't think so.
I'm not the troublemaker this time.
Jason, I'm going to have to talk to you about the date. of the meeting.
All right. Well, let me know sooner rather than later because I thought that we already had that one nailed down.
Yeah, I thought we did too.
But there's still time. It's a few weeks away.
Okay.
All right. Jason, I want to thank you and Gail for the way you handled this whole Camp Grossman thing. I think you really did a good job of managing what became a difficult situation. So thanks.
Agree.
Our pleasure. Gail
Yeah.
certainly deserves more credit than I do. She was a rock star in navigating mom and nurses and procedures. So we owe her many thanks for this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
And I do have one other item before we adjourn. I believe Suzanne has news she'd like to share with the group.
Hello, everybody. I'm not sure if Jason has clued you in at all, but recently there was a position that opened at the townhouse for something that is related to the degree that I got at Bridgewater. It's for a management analyst communications assistant, and I went through 2 rounds of interviews, and yesterday was notified that I was accepted for this position. And I just wanted to let everybody know as soon as I could so that it wasn't, one day I was here and one day I was not. But the start date is still being worked out, so I'm not sure, how that's going to go. But I'm sad that I'm, not going to be in the office with Jason and Linda and everybody seeing Steve visit. It's been really nice seeing Kay visit, seeing John visit. So I just wanted to let everybody know.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm very happy for you, but very sad to be losing you. You've been a great contributor to the entire office and the team.
Thank you.
I agree, Suzanne, but it's going to be great for your career. And we appreciate all you've done for us since you started, and we understand. But
Yes, well deserved, Suzanne. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And we're confident that you'll do well
Thank you.
and score.
And plus, now we have an insider in the town administration office, so that's great for the Board of Health.
Yeah, you can feed us all the inside information. That'd be
I'm the
perfect.
mole. Yep.
Yep. And so we do have an admin role that would need to be filled. If there is anyone on this call, wink, wink, who might be interested.
I don't know. Somebody with dark hair might be good now. So.
But I appreciate everybody's support, and Jason's been really, pushing me to do my best and hasn't been, holding me back or anything. He's been really encouraging me, and it's really nice to hear you guys say all those nice things. So I appreciate everybody in this meeting.
Well,
Well,
thank
we
you so much,
appreciate you
Suzanne.
too, Suzanne.
Good luck.
Thank you.
we will miss you, that's for sure.
I'll be around, still in the building.
I think actually, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but Suzanne may still be doing our meetings and our minutes. She is open to that. I did already speak with HR about it, so we can figure that out though. But just
So administration will have a mole in our office.
yeah, well, you know how it is, Steve. Works both ways, right?
Forget the Dover Demon. I'm the Dover Mole.
Yeah, I like that.
And maybe you can design a logo for yourself. All right, anything else?
Nope, no more surprises, just that one. Got nothing else.
Steve or John, do you have anything else?
No, I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Kay Peterson.
Nice,
John
Stephen
Questenbush.
Okay,
All right, great job, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all.
thanks.
Such a pleasure to work with all of you.
Likewise.
All right. Enjoy your afternoon.